So I'm here to talk about practicing to map based on articles and books. The idea being we have something like a book club, then the output is a map we can take a look at. Starting off by myself, yeah, I'm a fan of Wardley maps. I'm Julius Gamanyi, and I work at Accenture as a technology architect and software engineer. I started there 10 years ago in London. I transferred to Düsseldorf, and I live now in Germany. So I work in different industries, public services, retail, transportation, and payments. And so what I do tends to also vary, and so does the scope. And the best picture I could find so for explaining scope is Ruth Marland's umbrella diagram. So on the top here, you have something that affects the whole enterprise, whole organization. And then down here, you have the domains and the teams. So I'm usually within the teams or up here, going back and forth, but never the whole scope. It's just too big for me. Yeah, so that's just to set the context. Oh no, where's my bubble? Okay, there we go. So because it's architecture, then you bump into all these kinds of questions, especially if it's a delivery role. How do we manage these technology changes? And then when we consider the full spectrum of enterprise architecture, then technology architecture is only a small part of it. We take into account the principles, the patterns, we look at the trends. And then in this context, of course, there are so many technologies that are coming up. To preempt myself a little bit, IBM's organization structure in the 90s developed to reflect this kind of complexity and how to cope with such changes. So especially when it comes to the corresponding threats and the corresponding opportunities. So while I was busy having this kind of headache, that's how I stumbled upon Wardley maps. And then for me, my highlight, my tipping point is nicely encapsulated in the street where you have polar opposites that are valid at the same time. So yeah, that was important to me. Then I could explain why that's important. Because usually when someone asks, the answer I give back, oh, it depends. But now I can show them why it depends. And then I can go back to all those questions and they don't give me such a big headache anymore. So if we extract that and go a little bit meta, Simon gave this example of having a principle and these two beliefs that complete opposites, but that are valid at the same time. So then I thought I should practice more, but how? And what can I use? Then it occurred to me that books or articles or tweets are also very good substitutes to use to practice maps. And of course, why books? A few reasons. One is that we have these non-disclosure agreements at work, and so we're careful in what we can say outside and not. So that's one main reason. The other one is that books give us a shared context to map together. So I've experienced this in a couple of situations. We come together to map with a few friends, even also in the community, but we're from different industries. We don't see things the same way, or we use the same words, but they mean totally different things. So then to get us on the same page, I found books help in that direction. Or we just go back and forth until we have something stable that we can use as a base. Then another example was from mapping with others. So they're in different industries, but we're from the same company, so we have that shared context at least. We could map where I work. So one story was Yeah, there's a colleague we wanted to map a particular industry at least. And then he was also eager to learn mapping. And then the questions he used to pose about the industry, even like basic questions, um, I had no idea about because it's a completely different industry. But because we share that context of the work environment, we could at least draw some maps for our shared context. So, um, yeah. And the third reason, important one, is that the books give us matter and we give it expression, which is a map. I'll use this quote from Alexander Bain. He was teaching English composition, and in his preface, this is what he writes: that the composition of themes involves the burden of finding the matter. What topic should I write about? As well as the language. How should I express what I write about? And then for an English exercise, the matter should in some way or other be supplied, and the people disciplined in giving it expression. So I thought that fits pretty well um, to our problem of learning how to map and practicing to map. So what he used to do was to take a piece of prose and give it to his students, and then the students had to take that and turn it into poetry. Also vice versa. So take a piece of poetry and turn it into prose. So if we remix this to maps, we can say Wardley mapping involves the burden of finding matter as well as language. So for a mapping exercise, the matter should in some way or other be supplied, and the mapper disciplined in giving it expression. So this is one of the advantages of having a shared context. And also what books provide is that you don't have to think about what to map. I give you something and then you map it, or the other way around. I find something I'm interested in, and then I map the thing. So I don't have to worry about what should I map. It's already given for me. And then, so where do books fit on a Wordly map? That's a good question. So for this, I came across this publication, the Naval Doctrine publication, which talks about, it's a kind of old publication, but it talks about command and control, talks about the nature of such command and control, its processes, its systems, how to effectively build it up. And then the section on the process talks about the commander, the people, the equipment, and then, of course, making decisions is important in that area. So they apply OODA loop in this context. So the decisions and execution is taken out, and then they also consider the cognitive hierarchy as a way to build up this orientation. The end result is that we have an understanding of the environment, and then we can make a kind of a decision. So then, of course, had to map that. I don't know if this is very tiny, but I'll be able to zoom in and out. Just let me know how big I should make it. So let's see. Okay, I'll start from up here. So at the bottom is the standard 4 stages of evolution. And then up here I have my user needs. So that's me, or someone who's trying to learn. And then understanding involves knowing the why. And we saw in Simon's strategy cycle, there is the why of purpose and the why of movement. And that becomes the basis for our decisions. And then we are also able to act. So understanding involves also seeing patterns emerging from events in the environment, to anticipate consequences of our actions and those of others, as far as we can tell. And also an important point here, to recognize things that will remain unknown. And then for that, to understand, we need to apply judgment to knowledge. And then I have here judgment. That's based on our experience, expertise, and intuition. And that's usually a pipeline. It can be in the genesis phase or all the way to commodity. What we need to apply judgment to is this knowledge up here. And this helps build a picture of the situation as it exists or may exist. So I don't know if you're still able to see that, just let me know. So, and then what do we need? What does knowledge need? So we have these cognitive functions that get applied to evaluated process data. I'll come to the data part later, but here are these functions that that I'm representing as an activity of learning. So there is integrating various process data. So you need more than one. There is some analysis you need to do. There's correlating these different pieces. And then I've placed the drawing a Wardley map as part of these cognitive functions here. And then the process data itself is also a pipeline. What we have here that involve several books or articles on a topic. It's already been processed. Or here I can do data as a service or reports as a service. So like Daniel mentioned, that's an underlying component of building trust, especially for analysts. Then next step, let's see, it's up here. Then in order for this evaluated process data, we need the data itself to be processed, and we need to apply this evaluation criteria. And that's based on the importance, relevance, and reliability of this data. Now, this is also a pipeline, and underneath there we have I'm putting here one book instead of many, and then at the end of the spectrum, I've put training courses that are very generic. So it's data that's been processed, and then I have to apply this criteria, and then once I have that, I can draw my maps on this this component. Sometimes this is applied by someone else, and so taking recommendations from others about books, it means that has come into play, and I have something up here that's in a more evolved state that I can map. Then underneath here for the data, we have the raw data. These are the experiments we run, the signals or sensors that we pick up from the environment, and also the direct observation is also part of this raw data. Here I have to apply these processing functions, filter it, organize it, format it, collate it, plot it. Then I have something that I've processed. So now when it comes to books, I see books as being here because I don't need to do any of this. That's been done for me. Someone's recommended the book, if it's a good book. I usually have to do this myself. And then once I have this information that I've processed, evaluated, then I can apply this thing. So it's also somewhat continuous. I build up my knowledge, and then it leads all the way here to understanding, which is what the goal of this orientation exercise was. So that's one map. I'll go back to the slides. Yeah, it's a bit tiny. So let's look at the slides. And then why practice? Why practice? Yes. So one reason I like to practice is that some of the things that are mechanical that we find difficult at the beginning, they become easier. So I like to think of it as driving a car. There's the controls, there's the route, there's the marking on the roads. If the route is already known, or my GPS tells me that in 5 kilometers I need to make a turn, then my attention can focus on something else. When I was learning to drive, I could not hold a conversation. So if someone talked, I would say, stop, you're distracting me, I cannot talk. But after a while, then these controls become mechanical. I don't have to remember them anymore. And I can hold a conversation these days while driving. So what comes next is practice in action. Okay, so what book did I choose to map? This is Who Says Elephants Can't Dance from Lou Gerstner. He was the CEO of IBM from 93 to 2001 or 2. And I found this book interesting for several reasons. One is that it's very similar in some aspects to Accenture, especially when it began the whole global business services, at least from IBM side, how that grew and developed and what were the driving forces behind it to a certain extent. So I found that relevant for me. And then it also has about 3 to 5 loops around the strategy cycle. So he goes through landscape, doctrine, climatic patterns, he makes decisions, he acts, and then he reviews the decisions that actually, did they make sense? Are we heading in the direction I suspect we're supposed to be heading? So, and then also observing the environment, not just taking the words of his IBM colleagues, but actually going out and talking to the customers. So that I found very compelling. And then for some background, so I do have the map online. I'll send that link later. But for the background, at that time, IBM had lost lots of market share. It was on the brink of bankruptcy. And the general consensus was to split it up and delay its collapse, but at least bring in some money to pay the debts it had. So yeah, it's an interesting book. As for the map, let me see how I'm doing for time, and then then we'll continue. Okay, we still have a good way to go. So this is the map. Let me know if it's too small or let me know if it's just too small. So I mapped the first 7 chapters, and what I did was to just ignore the sequence of the chapters. So what I was interested in were all these components of the strategy cycle. So I get all the chapters, most of the paragraphs, split them all up, and then bring them together to have that kind of a picture. So that was good practice. So if I look on the map, okay, I'll make it slightly bigger in case it's not quite visible. So we have here, his purpose was to stop the bleeding and to put out the fire. And then here we have the moral imperative that's supporting his purpose. So everyone felt that it's a national treasure that needs to be rescued and fixed. So that was good enough energy and momentum to overcome a lot of inertia. So purpose, one was to survive, to be profitable again, and the scope was try not to run out of cash. So these are the underlying components. We have the economic model. The finances were just all over the place, especially expenses. And that's also what he needed to survive. So sometimes what I do when I'm mapping is, up here, put the needs of whoever's writing the book. Down here, we have the customer needs. And then I overlay the map of Wardley mapping on top of this map, because the actions that Gassner took had a great effect on doctrine. Okay, so we have the customer up here. They need compute for the enterprise. That's mainframe. And they need the product division to support the mainframe. And then the mainframe needs, of course, these divisions and the geographical units. So when I talked about preempting myself with the organizational structure of IBM, this is what I meant. So the product divisions came out of the need to tackle the challenges related to technological changes. So that became its own organizational unit. Then here for the map of Wardley mapping, the advantage of our competitors, one of the points is doctrine. And then these 2 nodes, one of them is climatic patterns, I think, and the other one is a value chain and evolution. So I mapped these 2 to represent that in this case. So these were the external systems, processes, people, everything. to do with everything outside of the company. And then this was internal to the company, the organizational units they had, the people, the processes and tools. And then when it comes to doctrine, there is this context-specific messages. These are specific to IBM, and he used to write a lot of articles and letters and memos, which is another reason I like the book. He was very careful and particular about his words, the ones he used at least. So I could also pay attention to them. I mean, some books are pretty sloppy, so I'm also guilty of writing sloppily. So okay, so that's the whole map. I'll zoom out a little bit so that we can all see it at a glance. And then these are the areas that he first dealt with. So I'll start from down here. So because of the organizational structure, that had an effect on doctrine. All these systems down here, external facing systems, internal facing ones, we'll come to doctrine later, but it was interesting to see. So then what else do we have? Then we have context-specific messages here that also affect doctrine. And then we have the third part up here, which is on purpose, scope, and surviving. So let's remove that. Then we have doctrine. Anyway, I paid attention to doctrine because there is a sentence in the book where he says that of all the things he learned at IBM, of all the initiatives he did, at the end of the day, he realized that culture, changing the culture, that was the game. As in, that was the only thing that mattered, at least. So, which is why I have it here, all pointing red. Then we come to our doctrine table. So we're going through the strategy cycle. I'll not read through all of these, but they are pretty bad. The key here is everything that he did not mention, I left it as white. Anything he mentioned once or twice, I colored that as yellow or orange, whatever that color is. And then everything he mentioned more than twice, that's pretty much in red. Then there are the corresponding page numbers. But this is on the Kindle version of Android. Then what I could infer, you have given this, then that obviously is going to be affected. So that was how the doctrine map looked like. And if we go back to the map, that is one reason I put doctrine here. Again, making assumptions visible. And then in my head, what I have is everything in this space is probably red. Here you have orange, and then here you have green. So that table that Simon usually shows of comparing two companies, then I always think doctrine for in that context for them is way over here. So where was I? Doctrine as is. So then he had these three initiatives. I'll make this. I don't think I can get any bigger. Try. Okay. So these are the three initiatives. One was to stop losing money, and that was the initiatives were okay. Let's do some cost reduction efforts, and that was, if I remember Chris's course, one of the principles was stop self-harm, right? Then he worked on doctrine, Operation Bear Hug, which was hello, executive teams, go out, get to know your customers, and write to me a 10-page report on what you've learned. And he read all of them, which was very interesting. So that was Operation Bear Hug. And then down here we have the re-engineering efforts. So this is removing some of the duplication. So if I go back on this map here, I'll read one quote for using a common language, which is very, very good. So it says, the result was the business equivalent of the railroad systems of the 19th century. Different tracks, different gauges, different specification of the rolling stock, if we had a financial issue that required the cooperation of several business units to resolve, we had no common way of talking about it because we were maintaining 266 different general ledger systems. At one time, our HR systems was so rigid that you actually had to be fired by one division to be employed by another. That's this part here, common language. And then this part on a bias toward action. However, what was also clear was that IBM was paralyzed, unable to act on any predictions. And these are the predictions IBM itself made about where the industry is going, where they should focus, what they should do. So they were unable to act on them, and there was no easy solutions to its problems. So these are some of the quotes in the book. Okay, so we have initiatives going on. Of course, there's inertia barriers here. Because of these geographical units, there were plenty. So they were like the boss, as in same thing with the product divisions. So no one wants change. So he did that. And then let's see. Then when we look here, these are the areas of doctrine. Ooh, I'll zoom out a little bit. I don't think it's visible. But Operation Bear Hugs, that targets know your users, which is down here. And then, okay, it's color coded to show the quotes, page numbers, and also which one of these initiatives in the previous map affect which area of doctrine. So that way, doctrines moves a little. Then we have, what else? Areas of doctrine. Then we have doctrine. So before it was pretty red. So now it's getting to be orange, yeah, improving a little bit because of all these initiatives. So this Operation Bear Hug, for example, if you're talking to your customers, if you're getting to understand them, if you get to know what their problems are, why they're still buying from you in the first place, then you're a pretty good way in getting to know them. And there are several. So in another map, I had the different size, different kinds of customers, not only big institutions, but also small companies. And that was how big IBM was at the time. And then when we look at how the map changed, you have this economic model, the expenses at least, being taken care of well. So they're no longer losing money. That's one of the things. Doctrine is improving. So the internal custom systems, these 266 ones, many are being replaced. Likewise for the external facing ones. So his scope of improving cash flow, I mean, everything that was here at the beginning was not guaranteed. So what I did was to place the starting point of this line is where this node used to be. Likewise, this one used to be here, this one used to be up here. Just to not clutter the map and just make it somewhat easier. So things are improving, things are looking up. And then if I get rid of that, then we come to the next part of the strategy cycle. So in the whole previous Wardley map, I've just made it as one of these, submap, where the scope has changed, the purpose has changed, and the moral imperative has not changed, but evolved, moving to the left, becoming more stable and predictable. And then based on these components, he went and started doing the second round of the strategy cycle, which is up here. So this patriotism is still there, but now he had another moral imperative, supported his other purpose, which was restoring growth. So he's no longer running out of money, at least not as fast as before. And now it's like, okay, how do I restore growth? And then this one as well leads to, okay, this is like, what's that phrase? New levels of activity, economic activity. I think I have that phrasing right. So then all of these things are changing. So the previous submap was here. lots of things have happened here, but now it's represented as a node. And then up here, you have new things. And then in the next map that follows, around the strategy cycle, we'll not be able to care about this map anymore. It's like history. But the effects were tremendous. So I'll just leave that there, go out of this map, and then, yeah, go back to the slides then. Where did I have the slides? I forgot where are the slides now. Same window. Okay. So that's that book. So I did say also that there are more loops around the strategy cycle. So I found lots of similarities between what he was doing, what he was thinking, and the strategy cycle and the these what are they called? The 5 elements. They're in there. I don't know if you had read Sun Tzu or Boyd, but the elements are there. Where it was just intuitive. So there's our friend, the strategy cycle that Simon already showed us. So then this is the table summarizing all the decisions he had to do. I'll not go through all of them, but we've covered these. And then these were the major decisions he took. And then down here on the second page, we have the effects of just this re-engineering initiative. I think that's here. This one here, the effects seen here. I mean, that's a lot of money to save. So if in 2 years you do something and it saves you $2 billion, and that's just in your IT department, I think that's pretty good. Oops. Yeah. So then he gave a summary of all the savings they got from this re-engineering effort, and it was a lot. Get rid of this. So hardware development coming from 4 years to 16 months. And that's pretty impressive. And then all these millions of dollars. I mean, yeah. So then that was one. Yeah. And that's, yeah, coming to the end. I have this quote from Francis Bacon, who says, some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, some few to be chewed and digested. That is, some books are to be read only in parts, others to be read but not curiously, and some few to be read wholly and with diligence and attention. So when you go through this cognitive hierarchy map, the books are already on this level or on this level. So we get to apply this evaluation criteria, and then we have something more of a product or commodity that we can use as a basis to practice Wardley mapping. And then, of course, the other side of the coin is from Simon himself, where he talks about some areas that it's usually followed by frustration as you dig into an area which looks promising and find parts of the field that are built on quicksand. So many books end up in they shouldn't have written it box, the tomb of tomes. So the reason I like this quote is because it's an excellent application of this part. So the books that Simon recommends, I also read because he's done the heavy lifting for me. Thank you, Simon. I think that's it. So if you have any questions, comments, let me know.